Good afternoon, my friends. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share to all your friends and family and everyone you know, and turn on notifications so I can be with you forever. So, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about a subject that has some significant meaning to especially people who are into astrology, and that's the concept of the Age of Aquarius. Now, the Age of Aquarius is something that's been propagated as this new era of, this sort of golden age as it's kind of, you know, presented to on the surface level at least, that it's sort of this great and amazing era of change and progress and all this other crap. And I want to sort of touch base on that because I think it's very much misunderstood and very much romanticized in a lot of ways. Um, so for people who believe in astrology or people who don't, you can't deny that this sort of era exists in general. And this isn't, the Age of Aquarius isn't something that's going to happen in the future. It's been happening for over 200 years. We're pretty much in it right now. We're in it, There's no progress, there's no shift into going into the Age of Aquarius. We're already right into it right now, into the middle of it. And whether or not it's going to get better or worse is, up for debate. I think it's going to get better in terms of how we communicate and how we move forward, how we progress as a society. But there is one thing to keep in mind, is that the Age of Aquarius isn't, its job isn't to be perfect. Its job isn't to be this utopic universe and world, which it sort of gets equated to, which I think is kind of naive to think of. So if we want to take a look at the Age of Aquarius, it started, there are two sort of schools of thought as to when they agree or disagree as to when it happened. Some people say it started in the 1800s with the launch of the Industrial Revolution, which is what I personally believe to be the case. And then there's the other people who think that it started in 1960 around with, with space exploration and technological advancements. And I think it's that point in time, I wouldn't consider it the starting point, but it was definitely an escalation point. But it's been happening since the 1800s with industrialization, with new technologies being, revolutionized, so to speak. Before the Age of Aquarius was actually the Age of Pisces. So when we're looking at these ages, it's based around where the sun is at a certain point during the equinox. So normally it's in the sign of Aries, but then there's where the sun rises, or I forget what the exact determinant is, but it's based around where the sign is on the horizon line. And it's something like that. I don't really know, but it has something to do with that, and I'm not really entirely sure. It's not really relevant to this video. What is important is to understand that the Age of Aquarius is essentially capitalism and communism. It's both of those things, if we want to really get into it and understanding what those things are, because those two concepts originated at the time when the Age of Aquarius sort of started. And you don't have to believe in astrology to see that as reality. You can see this shift in society. Whereas before, if you look at Pisces and the characteristics of Pisces, it's all about secret knowledge, secret occult, all about deeper spiritual understandings. And that was, when we look at the ages, it's sort of like, who's in charge here? Who has the power? And the power is always ruled by that sign of the age. So, during the Age of Pisces, which you can sort of equate with, Jesus Christ, and a little bit before that, but it comes in line with Jesus Christ and the Buddha, and just the rise of religion and spirituality, and that became the power that existed for 2,000 years. So when you look at the power structures back then, it was the church, it was the monasteries, it was the higher order, it was the secret knowledge that was kept from the public, the higher spiritual knowledge. Then once we got into the Age of Aquarius, everything changed. The church had no power anymore. religion had no power anymore. Who held the power? The power was whoever was making progress, whoever was making technological advancements, whoever was building businesses, building structures. That's Aquarius in general. Aquarius is progress, moving forward. There's a little bit of a rebelliousness to it. It's a lot of cold-hearted rejection of spirituality almost. And that's sort of what's been the general narrative of power in the last 200 years, is the rejection of religion, the rejection of spirituality in favor of rationality, in favor of technology, in favor of progress. And those are the people that hold the power right now. And when you're looking at, even philosophically, Nietzsche was around during this time, and he declared God is dead, and in a lot of ways he was right. It was the death of Pisces, the age of Pisces. It was the death of religion as the controlling force of the world. And then it became the control of the capitalist, of the communist, of the atheist, right? It's no surprise these two ideologies originated at the exact same time, because that's what Aquarius rules. It rules networking, it rules progress, and building a community almost, which is sort of the interesting thing about capitalism versus communism, is that capitalism is the full force and driving power of progress, development, technology, industry. And then you have communism, which is the more networking side of Aquarius, the more building a community, the more building everyone's together, everyone is the same, right? That's very much Aquarius, is making sure everyone is the same. We're all on the same level. We all have the same ideology. But the reality is that we don't. We're all different. We're all individuals. We're all unique in our own specific ways. So there is that tug and pull of each other that exists within the world and society. And those are the people who are always going to win. It's not going to be the authority of people who claim authority based off of, their spirituality or their ancestry, right? That's why the Tsars lost to the communists in the early 1900s, was because communism, despite it not exactly working properly, it was an Aquarian ideology, it was an Aquarian mindset, and since that was the age of Aquarius, it naturally won. And the same thing with capitalism. You had the British versus the Americans. The British wanted to maintain authority and the monarchy with religion and all this other stuff, and you had America saying, no, let's separate church and state, let's have freedom of enterprise, let's have freedom of business, and of course they won. So that's what the Age of Aquarius is. There's no real utopia behind it, although there is an ideal mindset of striving towards utopia, which is why utopian ideology started springing about during this time with communism and with capitalism. They both wanted to attain a perfect world where everyone had the same idea and the same goals, and they realized that it didn't really work at the end of the day, because reality sets in, and then we realize that we can't just create the utopian world that we want. But it doesn't mean that people aren't going to try, and they're going to try really hard, and they're going to almost die for this to exist. So it's interesting to look at historically, whether or not you believe in the astrology or not, it still exists, it's still present, it's still the reality. It's like, it's gravity, these things exist. The Age of Aquarius is real. And I think it's interesting to look back also. If you look at the late 90s, there was this predisposition to accepting the Age of Aquarius, and there was this sort of new, I don't know how you describe it, but there was this general vibe of people just wanting to move forward and move into the future and feeling like we've made it to the Age of Aquarius and all this other stuff, and it was very idealistic. And this wasn't because of the Age of Aquarius per se, it was because Uranus was actually in Aquarius, its home sign. So naturally, that was the powerhouse of that time. That was what was in control. It was Uranus in Aquarius, and it was expressing that energy to its best ability. So, that was the rise of the internet, the rise of all these internet-based companies, the dot-com boom, as they call it. And then, with all this like rise of pop music, this rise of electronic dance music, that was a huge development in music and everything. It's like all this connection that was happening. And I'm not sure when the last time Uranus was in Aquarius, but I believe it was definitely around the early 1900s, maybe in like 1910s around, which at that time was when the telephone was being implemented, when the car, the car was being implemented, when Ford invented the car, right? So, again, about communication, about transportation, about connecting people together in a weird way. So that's really what the Age of Aquarius is. And there is, some negative drawbacks to that, obviously. And that's the complete ignorance of respecting people's individuality, respecting people's community, their own community rather, and respecting generally the earth and the resources that it has, because the Age of Aquarius doesn't care if there is a limited amount of resources. It has this ideal state and this ideal world it wants to live in, and it will do everything it can to get there, and it doesn't care about resources or the land or whatever. And that's why you have a lot of problems with, especially in Canada, we're going through this issue with the pipeline that's being built over native land. And guess what? This is Age of Aquarius just in a nutshell. It does not give a shit about the native land or, the ancient wisdom or the ancient world. It's going forward, and it's not holding back under any means necessary. It's going one direction, and that's forward. It doesn't give a fuck about the past or, traditions and rituals and spirituality. All it cares about is progress, no matter the cost, right? And that's sort of the toxic mentality that exists within it, because it's, holding back from the realities of this world. And it's sort of wanting to move away from that Pisces, Age of Pisces mentality of religion and spirituality and higher order, and taking things slow and things not really making sense, and things being very mysterious and weird, and a lot of shit like that. And it's like, fuck that, we're going forward, we're building, we're gonna progress no matter what. I don't care about the spirituality. That's Aquarius. And then before Pisces, you had Aries, the Age of Aries, and that you can attribute to the Roman Empire, to just all those empires that existed back in the day before Christ, right? It was just a very warrior mentality mindset, and those were the people who ruled the world. It was the warriors, it was the warmongers, it was the people who had the passion and the drive to do whatever they wanted. You look at early history during the Age of Aries, and it was all violence, it was all like killing, it was all triumph, it was all raiding people's villages and taking for yourself, which was and then all of a sudden spirituality came in, the occult came in, a deeper understanding of emotions came in all of a sudden. And this was a new development that people never really had. We like to look back on the last 2,000 years of religion being super oppressive. If you think about the world before spirituality, before religion, it was way more brutal. Like, people didn't have a moral compass at all. Like, you had to have literal philosophers invent morality and invent, they didn't really invent it. It was always there, but they had to uncover it for people to sort of see it. And that was what Pisces was. It was digging deep into that mindset. And before that, it was with Aries, and that was a lot of war. And no one saw what spirituality was. No one saw the deeper meanings behind things. They just saw what they wanted, and they took it. And if you didn't like it, then they'd kill you, and that was it. That still happens. All these things, you can't just like equate these ages as being 100% concrete. This is how they are, and they'll always be like this. There's always going to be shifts, and there's always going to be like different energies circulating, but this is generally how you look at it from like a holistic perspective of what the general theme is of the era. So anyway, that's all I really have to say about this topic. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment, and share, and turn on notifications and all that crap, and I'll see you next time.